Hey, it's Dave here and welcome to this video in which we're going to cover lab testing to try and uncover the root cause or the reasons behind your bloating. So, as I do with all of these different conditions, I divide the different types of lab tests that you can do into two categories. One is medical testing that you'd really need to see a doctor or a gastro specialist for, and the other is the kind of testing that you can do at home just off your own bat. If you get frustrated with the medical system, if they won't run the tests that you want to have run, if there's a big waiting list and so on and so forth. So let's start with the medical system. And as always, there's no right or wrong, good or bad, better or worse with any of these tests. They're all tools in the toolkit just to help you figure out what's going on. The medical system tends to like to run a lot of oscopies, endoscopies they're called. Endo just means inside. And they have oscopies where they put a scope down through your mouth and esophagus and the other way back up through your colon. And they're called gastroscopy and colonoscopy, respectively. Not particularly pleasant to have. You have to go to the clinic, you have to lie on your side and have these things inserted wherever they need to insert them. And they have a camera on the end. And so they'll have a good look around, look for damaged tissue, look for inflammation, look for potentially sinister or serious issues like tumors and things like that. You can find ulcers, you can find some of the inflammatory bowel disorders like Crohn's disease and colitis and what have you. And bloating can accompany some of those more serious conditions, and therefore it is useful to have these oscopies performed. But the problem with them is not only are they inconvenient and you have to travel sometimes a long way and wait a long time for them to be done, that many people's bloating is being caused on a kind of a certain level that these tests are not going to find. And so functional digestive disorders are basically disorders where there's a symptom or a series of symptoms, but these kinds of tests don't reveal the underlying cause because they can't, right? So if the symptoms are being caused by foods, eating habits, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, candida, parasites, and things like that, you're not going to find those using these kinds of tests. And so they're great for finding more serious problems, but they're not necessarily great for discovering the root cause of these functional digestive symptoms. Some gastroenterologists use the LBT, and the LBT stands for lactulose breath test. There's actually a number of different breath tests you can use. Glucose breath test, for example, as well, fructose breath test. What they're basically doing is getting you to drink a sugar solution, different types of sugar, and then they're measuring the gas in your breath over a period of time. So you have to blow into little bags every 20 minutes. And they measure the gases. And if those gases are elevated at certain times, or if there are certain patterns of gas production in your breath, then it can be a very strong sign, basically diagnostic, that you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that's one of the major causes of bloating and abdominal distention. So that's a really useful test. Problem is, not every doctor really believes in this test. SIBO is still kind of, in medical systems view, is kind of, they're on the fence with it. They realize that there's something going on, but deeply within the medical system, unless you go and find a private gastroenterologist, you may find that you struggle to get this test because still a lot of people don't really believe that SIBO is that big of a problem. So you can struggle. Now, you can also do the breath testing at home. So you can have test kits sent to you, and you can do that very same test from the comfort of your own home. You don't need a clinical visit for that one. Then with the medical system, of course, there's a bunch of scans that you can have done. You can have ultrasounds done. You can have CT scans. You can have MRI scans. And they can be really useful in detecting blockages and structural malformation and things like that in the internal organs. But again, how many people have bloating, because of these more serious blockages? Probably a handful, right? So definitely we don't want to discount these kinds of tests because they are incredibly useful in some cases. But for the most part, bloating is a functional disorder that isn't really going to be the result of something major going on with the structure of the intestine. But that said, there are some people out there who do genuinely have these kinds of medical problems who need these tests in order to identify what is going on. Most of us, when we have heartburn and constipation and bloating and loose stools and all the symptoms that kind of go around IBS, we need functional testing. We need to find out what is in the body that shouldn't be there so that we can get rid of it. And we want to figure out what is missing or inadequate so we can put it back. And that's what these functional tests do. So we've already discussed the breath test. You can also, of course, do a comprehensive stool test. You'll see me talk about the comprehensive stool tests a heck of a lot because you can look at 70 or more markers in a single stool sample these days, including yeast and fungal overgrowth, which can cause bloating, including opportunistic bacteria, which can cause bloating, including low levels of friendly bacteria that can predispose you to too many bad bugs overgrowing. You can look at H pylori, and you can also look at whether you're digesting your food properly, what's going on with your immune system, what level of inflammation you have, as well as all the bad bugs and parasites that I didn't mention just a second ago as well. So the comprehensive stool test, you can just do that at home. Now, interestingly, on the comprehensive stool test, there's a bunch of markers called opportunistic bacteria, and they include things like Bacillus and Klebsiella and Morganella, Streptococcus, things like that. And those bugs, when you see them in high levels, they're often associated with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, but you can't confirm the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth without the breath test. And the reason is, it's not that complex. It's just simply that when you do a stool sample, you're picking up material from all the way down from the mouth all the way down to the anus, and that might be 25 feet worth of digestive system. And so the stool sample shows you that there is either too much or too little of some kind of bug in there, but you don't know exactly where in the digestive system those imbalances are occurring. So you can infer that there may be some SIBO from a stool test, but really what you need to do is the breath test to figure out exactly where that overgrowth is occurring. Now, you can also run something called an organic acids test. And you can do an organic acids test that just looks at digestive markers, or you can do a comprehensive organic acids test that looks at certain nutritional values, things like inflammation, immune function, B vitamin status and what have you, also your neurotransmitters and your brain chemistry and things. But for the purposes of the bloating, usually what people like to do is just run what we call a microbial organic acids test. And that's a urine test actually, and it finds chemical footprints in the urine for microbial overgrowth. So if you have high levels of, say, candida, you might have high levels in the urine of something called arabinose. If you have high levels of mold overgrowth in your intestine, you might find that you have some of the furin chemicals in your urine. And so you can really elucidate what's going on in certain parts of your intestine just using the organic acids test as well. And that can be very helpful. But the problem with the organic acids test is it doesn't look for H. pylori, it doesn't look for parasites, it doesn't look at your inflammation levels in the GI tract, your immune function and things like that. So each test has a value, but it's never absolutely everything that you might need to know. And then finally, we've got food sensitivity testing. Food sensitivity testing can be done usually using a full blood draw that you have to go to a clinic to have done. And then you can have different types of immune function tested from that blood sample against different foods and different environmental influences. Or you can have a kit sent to your home where you just do a finger prick sample, drip the drips of blood onto a card, and then send that off to the lab. Now that won't look at all the different types of food sensitivity, but it gives you a good idea of some of the things that might be going on, and it gives you a very quick and easy way to individualize your diet. And so that can be really helpful as well. So we've got a whole bunch of different tests available. If you can get what you need from the doctor and you don't have to pay very much for it, that's fantastic. Or if your insurance policy covers it, etc. But most of the time, guys, we've got to take our health into our own hands. There's nobody waking up in the morning saying, or committed to our individual health. Nobody wakes up in the morning committed to Dave's health, right? So I got to take responsibility for getting myself to where I want to go in terms of my health and body and mind. And so these tests are all available if you want to use them. They can quickly help you uncover the reasons for your bloating, and then hopefully you can get rid of it because you can take specific and precise action steps based on the test results. These tests on an individual basis I've covered in greater detail in different video series. So if you want to have a look around, I'll put some links under the video window for you. You can have a look at these tests in ultra fine detail from those other video series. Hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.